Hi there. Welcome to another episode of Marine Writers Podcast for Michiana, Marine Writers Michiana. It's 2026, and we've got an episode for you today. We met a Marine that was on the cover of Mark Bowden's book. This guy right here. This one's standing up. I hope I got him from California. It'll be a pleasure. This should be a good one. First, so I'd like you to please like and subscribe our podcast, as it helps us with views and things with the platform and all that. First news first, Marine Writers in Michiana, we're going to have a poker run June 13th. So if any of you are in the area and would like to come out, we'd certainly like to have you. Also, we have a national rally out in Cypress, California. A bunch of us are going to ride out there to that from northern Indiana and southern Michigan. So we'll be taking you guys along for the ride, and it should be awesome. We're going to take 4 or 5 days to get out there. There's about 6-8 of us that are going to go. We'll be out there for 3 days, and then we're going to ride back. There's a group of us that's going to go to Zion National Park, all the way back Monument Valley, and up through the western side of the Colorado Rockies, through the $1 Million Highway and Rocky Mountain National Park, and that back. So that should be super fun. And we have another group that's going to go to Sturgis this year, and so we'll be filming that as well, I'm sure, and get some stuff going on there. Also, we have a blowout party that we do at the end of the year. That is October 3rd. So like I said, if you live in the area and you'd like to come by, or if you just want to come on into town, I think Rich might be coming into town for the blowout party, and we'll be filming that and putting that on here as well. The original ones, we're a veterans organization, and we are archiving veteran stories for future generations. It's been a while since we did one, because I wanted to read this book and get some information on the Battle of Hue, because like a lot of people, I didn't really know that much about the Battle of Hue, even though I was in the military. It was fought in January 31st of 68 to March 2nd. So what had happened was, it was during Tet, okay? So a lot of this is their Lunar New Year in Vietnam, and a lot of the Vietnamese forces, the ARVNs, were sent home for a holiday. So the city wasn't really that protected, nor was it ever really in danger. Hue was the cultural center of Vietnam, a bunch of palaces and antique buildings, really old buildings that nobody wanted to bomb. So it was kind of understood that Hue was kind of off limits until Tet came about. And the North Vietnamese wanted to attack all over South Vietnam to show that they could launch a major offensive like that. When the NVA started, they had I've heard estimates between 2,000 and 7,000 people in the mountains outside of Hue before the attack. And when they launched it, they came into town full force, and they took over the city. They took over the city for that period of time. U.S. Marines were there. I think there was about 150 of them, 130 of them there. And they sent back to Saigon and Da Nang that, hey, buddy, we're getting overrun. We need some reinforcements here. Well, the powers that be didn't really believe it. And they were like, yeah, sure. And they're like, no, we need, and as that was going on, the enemy was getting stronger and stronger. Eventually, they did send reinforcements, and by the time it was done, most of the city was just in ruins. And we lost 250 Marines. I believe another 1,500 were injured. And so it was it was not the bloodiest battle in the Vietnam War. There hadn't been that kind of street fighting. It was an urban fight. It was block to block, house to house. They hadn't done that kind of fighting since World War II. Also, it was a predecessor to the type of fighting that you would see in Mogadishu and Black Hawk Down, which is another book that Mark Bowden wrote before he wrote this one, that became the movie that everybody knows about. Another aspect that I forgot to mention about the Battle of Hue was Stanley Kubrick came out with a movie, a number of years ago, called Full Metal Jacket. classic movie. The first part of it is boot camp, and then the second part of it is shot in the city of Hue, the Battle of the City of Hue. I thought it did a good deal on showing some of the destruction in Hue. So if you guys ever want any reference, go back and check out that movie. This famous photograph right here, this is part of Marine Corps lore. It's known every Marine Corps league in the country, all kinds of places, anything to do with Marine Corps. This is one of the photographs. It was made famous by a photographer who was there in a way. His name was David Bruce. I hope I'm not butchering that too bad. And there were a lot of reports that were coming out during the Battle of Hue about how fierce the fighting was and the casualties that were coming, but the powers up in the Marine Corps and the military didn't want to believe it. So a lot of reporters, young independent reporters, were going to Hue to see what was really going on. And they were sending back conflicting stories that the fighting was way worse than the powers to be were reporting. So these journalists were going there, and it was conflicting reports between these freelance journalists and the government. So finally, Walter Cronkite, for our younger viewers, was like the godfather of evening news back in the 60s. He had been a war correspondent during World War II, and he said, well, doggone it, let me go see for myself. And he flew to Saigon, and then he went to Hue. And he came back with a much different opinion than what he was hearing from the official government routes. And he went on to the evening news and said, maybe this is not winnable. We don't want to talk about victory, but how do we get out? And it was a real turning point in the Vietnam War. It was the first time the American people had not necessarily trusted their government, believed what they were being told. And they would sow the seeds for that kind of distrust and resentment that we have even to this day. I'm not going to sit here and get political on this podcast, but the Battle of Hue was huge in the turning point in the Vietnam War, because after that, we talked about how to get out, not how to win. And it would roll on for a few more years. LBJ, President Johnson, after that Walter Cronkite airing, decided that he was not going to run for re-election. Nixon comes in. Nixon wants to get us out of Vietnam. And then they start to do the turn down, if you will. I know I'm just probably butchering the heck out of it, and somebody's going to slam me over this. But I'm pretty much, paraphrasing it as how big the Battle of Hue was. We are going to have Rich. We're going to sit down. We're going to talk with him in about another 20 minutes or so. We'll come back, and looking forward to another podcast for Marine Riders Michiana. Semper Fi.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming back. They're doing another episode of Marine Riders Podcast, and we have a special guest on with us today, Richard Tahan. Yeah?
That's close enough.
Hopefully, sorry, buddy. And we're doing a remote podcast because he's in California right now. But the way I met Rich was through guns. It was on our episode 3, 4. And I was talking to him after he came out and did a podcast, and he introduced me to Rich here. And Rich, it's an honor to have you on here today. Tell some things about the faith part of your life. Where were you born? How'd you grow up? Mother, father, brother, sisters, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. I was born in Los Angeles, at the Los Angeles Doctors Hospital, which isn't there anymore. I have an older sister, Lorraine, and a younger sister, Diane.
Mm-hmm.
And we grew up in the old Echo Park, Glendale area of Los Angeles. And we were there for, about 8 or 9 years. I went to a little Catholic school. Me and my older sister did. And then from there, several years later, we moved to La Puente, California, where I went to junior high school and then high school and graduated in 1967.
Okay, so was that still in the greater Los Angeles area?
Yes. Yes, it's not too far from Chavez Ravine, where I used to play in there when I was younger, ride my bike, and now it's Dodger Stadium. They
I
put a
wow.
stadium in there. Yeah,
My grandparents lived in Glendale, out there.
yeah.
I lived out there when I was a little kid. It sure has changed. I thought, yeah. When you were in school, you told me that you played football and baseball.
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I played football and baseball, both varsity, and baseball was I really excelled at that. I was a all league, all county, and all CIF baseball player. Football, a little different. I was second team, not all league, but what do they call that? The honorable mention in football. Yeah, and academically, I just made grades enough to play football and baseball. I wasn't really good at school,
But
it's funny.
College, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I did the same thing. You have the grades to play football. So when you graduated from high school, then you were telling me you went on to play college ball for a little bit.
Yes, I went to Mount San Antonio College and I played football there on the junior college team. And I was sort of a backup running back, and I was with the team for 9 weeks and then I had to leave it because of the draft notice. I kept eluding and they warned me. And so I had to tell the coach I have to leave the team, and he understood. So from right then and there, instead of going in the Army, I decided I wanted to go in the Marine Corps because a lot of my friends went in the Marine Corps, and I kind of looked up to those guys because they were about a year or two ahead of me. In the school, and so I just kind of followed in their footsteps, and I joined the Marine Corps.
Because you're looking at getting drafted into the Army.
I don't want to go in the Army. Sorry.
So you're getting drafted in the Army, so you volunteered and joined the Marine Corps. Is that it?
What's that?
So you were looking at getting drafted into the Army, but
Yeah.
you're going to go into the Marine Corps. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So you went into the Marine Corps in 68?
67.
67?
Yeah, November of 67.
November of 67 is when you volunteered to go in.
Yeah.
Where did you go to boot camp? Did you go down to San Diego?
Yep, I was a Hollywood Marine, so I went down to San Diego MCRD.
All right. And then how long was boot camp back then? And could they still hit you back then?
Yeah, they accelerated the program. It was only 7 weeks. So the first week is kind of administrative stuff to get all the paperwork done, and they throw you your little uniforms and boots and all that stuff. And then, of course, the last week's graduation week where you practice marching for the parade when you graduate and stuff. So actually just 5 weeks of where they kick your butt and they mess with you and all that stuff.
Get after
it was accelerated, yeah, because they needed to get guys into Vietnam as quick as possible. Now I think their boot camp is like 13 or 14 weeks long.
Yeah, it's long now.
Yeah, it's long now. Yeah.
So they had you on an accelerated program. They had you on an accelerated program through boot camp. And you told me that you were a machine gunner when you were in Vietnam.
Yes.
Did you pick that up?
No, when you go through ITR and you graduate, that's when they send you to your MOS. They said, okay, you're going to be a machine gunner, you're going to be a air traffic controller, you're going to be a truck driver, you're going to be artillery guy, mortar guy, grunt, and they tell you what you're going to be. And so they made me a machine gunner. And before I even got to machine gun school, they had me interview with this gunnery sergeant for the snipers because I was high range on the rifle range, which I've always been. I've got 6 times I qualified with the rifles, and all 6 times I was top rifleman in the series. So I had this thing about shooting. I was really good. And when I got into the machine gun school, I broke the range record. But this gunnery sergeant for the snipers wanted me to be a sniper. And he said, the school is, I forget, it was accelerated also. And they wanted me to go there for, I think it was almost a year, and I'd have to re-enlist to a 4-year contract because I was on that 2-year contract that most of the Marines were. And I said, well, after I come out of machine gun school, I get 20 days leave. And they says, no, you're not going to get 20-day leave. You're going to go right into the program. And I said, well, what do I do? And he says, well, you have to wait till it opens up. The school opens up, and it's about 50 days. And I said, what do I do in 50 days? He says, you'll go around Camp Pendleton picking up trash and stuff like that. Yeah. I said, you're kidding me. And I said, nah, I'll pass. So I became a machine gunner.
You're in machine gun school.
Yeah.
How long was that? How long was that school? Couple weeks?
Days, staging battalion, a couple days. Staging battalions when you start marching and you've got like actual NCOs and staff NCOs marching you and stuff like that. Whereas, in boot camp, you could have a PFC, as a guide or what do you call it? The guys in the front there. Jeez, my mind's, yeah. Squad leaders. That's what I was trying to get. Squad leaders. Yeah. But now the squad leaders were all corporals and guys marching us were like staff sergeants and sergeants, so it was, once I knew that, I said, uh-oh, this is the big time now.
Yeah. So after machine gun school, did you get any leave or did you get that?
Yeah, I got 20-day leave, and that was really nice. And I took a couple of my buddies with me to my house because I lived in Hacienda Heights, which is probably from Camp Pendleton about an hour and 20-minute drive. And those guys were like from Wisconsin or Michigan, and they really didn't have any place to go because, they were so far away. And so I said, well, just come stay with me and stuff. So they got to know my parents really good, and my parents really liked them a lot and stuff. So
cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So after you got done with high school and your machine gun school, where'd you go next?
After machine gun school?
Yes.
We went right to staging battalion after came back from leave. And then from staging battalion, we flew to Okinawa, and that's when we got all our shots, those big old needles and stuff.
Yeah. They gave you all your shots and everything before you went to Vietnam.
From you sailors.
Yeah. Yeah, we did a lot of poking, a lot of sticking on.
Oh yeah, you did a lot of poking, and then they just were starting to use that gun too, where they shoot the air into your arm,
the little circular star.
Yeah. Do they still do that?
I don't know. I thought a while myself, but they did it when I was. We were just using regular needles and syringes and stuff like that. We didn't have any guns, but they might have added a boot camp still. I can't really remember.
Yeah, we got a few shots in boot camp, but the big one, the GG shot, that big needle, I think it was a 20 gauge needle. And boy, I seen a couple guys in front of me pass out when they seen that needle. They just boing.
Right, and malaria shots and stuff like that.
Like a shotgun going in your arm.
Right. Okay, so after Oki, here we go all the way to Vietnam, huh? What did you fly into? Saigon or Da Nang?
I landed in Da Nang, and when I got out of the airplane, a mortar round hit the runway. I'd say probably about 150 yards away from our aircraft. And it was a civilian aircraft because they were hiring like American Airlines and stuff like that to bring the soldiers over. And it was a civilian aircraft. And when that round hit, I just didn't think it was like a big deal because that runway there in Da Nang is like 3 feet thick of concrete. And it looked like a hand grenade hit the thing, because it was just so hard. And a couple of guys in the GSE equipment drove out there, looked at the runway, and then turned around and left because it really didn't do anything to the runway. So I still hadn't got the effect that I was in a country where you're going to get shot at, so.
Mm-hmm. But a mortar round like 150 yards from you?
Yeah.
Wow. Holy miracles. So when you got off the plane in Vietnam, that was it like? I mean, the mortar rounds hit.
Well, the heat, the humidity is really high. And they took us to our area where we're going to be staged at there in Freedom Hill there in Da Nang. And we stayed there for a couple of days. They had us fan fire some rifles because it was the rifle that they were issuing you to take into battle. So you had to get used to your rifle. Even though I was a machine gunner, they still gave me a rifle.
They still give you an M16?
M16, yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, when they flew us up to Fubai, we landed and the plane was kind of shimmying around there because there was craters in the runway from rockets and mortars that had hit the runway. So, and it's that metal type of stuff that they put on the ground. I forget what they call that, on the tarmac.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I still didn't get the effect that I'm going into battle yet, even though I seen that. And then, but once I got up to, they picked me up and took me up to Camp Eagle. I remember I was getting my gear, my flat jacket and helmet and all that stuff up there. And the guy had a bunch of flat jackets piled up about 3 or 4 feet high in the air. And he grabbed one and he threw it at me and said, "Here's you go." And it had 3 bullet holes in it with blood on it. And I said, "I can't take this. It's got bullet holes in it." And he says, "Why? It's a flat jacket." I said, "Well," and I told him in a kind of a kidding way, I said, "Because a round might go through one of those holes and hit me." So he kind of laughed about that.
Yeah.
And he was messing with me because then there was another pile there and he threw me a brand new one, flat jacket. So, and then, yeah, because I was a boot.
Yeah, you're a boot. You're a boot. So how old were you? No, did you get issued? You got issued this gear in Fubai?
Yeah, Fubai,
Okay.
which is about 8 or 9 miles from Hue.
Okay.
And then they picked me up. I think they picked me up in a Jeep because I think I was the only guy that was sent there, And then I went up to Camp Eagle, got all my gear, and then they put me on a deuce and a half and then sent me down into Hue, crossing the Perfume River.
Yeah.
And they secured that bridge because I heard stories that, the Marines that were first going across there took a lot of rounds and lost a few Marines trying to cross that bridge and stuff like that. So when I caught up with 2-5, I got to meet Chittum and he welcomed me to the 5th Marines. And then he says, "You're going to be assigned to Captain Christmas's team." So I got to meet Captain Christmas. He wasn't there at the time, but once they sent me out to the location where he was, I got to meet him, and then he says, "Welcome aboard." And he asked what my MOS was. I says 0331, and he goes, "Oh, you're still a grunt, so you're an 0311 always." And he goes, "All us Marines are 0311s, pilots, crew chiefs, artillerymen, everybody's a 0311."
Right.
So I carried the rifle and then went into the city, met up with the guys there, and that's when I realized you're getting shot at. I mean, it was so hard to comprehend that somebody's actually trying to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to comprehend that.
Right. Right. So how long had the Battle of Wood been going on for a little bit? Been going on for a week or so? When you got there, had it just started?
I was on the tail end of the major. They'd already taken the Citadel, and we had a lot of North Vietnamese in the city that we were trying to take out, I mean, the newsreel, of course, they never are accurate. I don't know if the generals or whatever want people in America to think that we secured the town and stuff like that, but it wasn't secure. It took us till like August, I think, to get them all cleared out, and so we did that, and then that's when that famous shot came of getting shot at, and as you can see, I was the only guy that stood up because I didn't think, I can't believe we're getting shot at, so I just stood up. And I remember, I mean, a couple of guys called me crazy or idiot for standing up like that. But, I just said I'm trying to gain fire superiority because that's what I was taught in all the schools I went through, the machine gun school and at the rifle range. They always said gain fire superiority no matter what. So that's what I did.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now that picture's in the Wing Legend.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite a bit all over the place. Sometimes I'll be going into a recruiting office and there it is, or a museum, and they'll have it up there where the veteran things are. And like I told you, it was in a couple of MTV musicals, with Billy Joel and James Taylor.
Yeah, Billy Joel, Good Night in Saigon.
Yeah.
And James Taylor, Fire and Rain.
Fire and Rain, yeah.
Yeah,
and it's funny because all this, even the book when it first came out on Facebook, people are calling me, telling me this, hey, you're on your photos on Facebook, and then those songs when they came out, people would call me, hey, you're on MTV, blah blah blah, and I never find out. It's like they never call me and tell me, "Hey, guess what?" That's always being told by a lot of my veteran friends. They pick up on that stuff like that before I even do.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, we'll get into that here in a few minutes about how the photograph was taken and then the book and everything. Let me ask you this: how did you exfil? How did you get out of Hawaii? And did you go back to Pula'i, or where did you go to after Hawaii?
No, we marched out across the bridge and then went up the hill to Camp Eagle. It was probably a couple miles march that we did.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, and then they had deuce and halves up there waiting for us, and they were going to ship us down to Da Nang. So we loaded up on those trucks, and then we headed for Da Nang, which is about 22 miles south of Hue, I believe. I'm not that accurate, but we had to drive down the Haimon Pass, and we kept thinking we're going to get ambushed because that place has been hit so many times, and all the Marines kept their gun at bay when we were driving down the canyon there. It's along the ocean. It's a beautiful drive, but just you had to watch out because the hills are right there on your right. I mean, they're just right there, and you got nothing but cliff on your side. And if you get hit, you don't have too much to go by. So
okay, so you ex-studied go down to Da Nang, and then how much longer were you in country on that tour? What'd you do after that?
I was in the country for 13 months, 13 long months, I tell you.
Oh, Hawaii was at the beginning of your 13 months?
No, Hawaii was probably towards the end of or beginning of my tour.
The beginning of your tour?
Yeah, I was probably in Hawaii maybe not even a month. I can't, yeah, and then they finally said, "Oh, the city's secure," and then they got the couple of battalions of the Vietnam Rangers to take over our positions, and then I think 1-1 was there, First Marine, First Battalion. They stayed back a little bit, and then when we left Camp Eagle, the Army came in and took over our spots. I think they came up there and they looked around and said, "Is it secure? Is it secure?" And we go, yeah, come on up. I tell you.
Yeah.
Oh, I had it up to here with the Army, I tell you.
What was that?
Well, they tend to leave their guys behind, and us Marines will always take our wounded no matter what, And there was an instance when I was with the Vietlops in the Chulai Tamki area, and we were blocking force, and the Army went in there and they just got the heck beat out of us. They went with a bunch of tanks and tracks because it was a cav.
Mm-hmm.
And they left one of the tanks back that got hit by RPG, and then Viet Cong jumped on the tank and turned the radio on, and they tortured one of the Army guys in there, and they could hear him screaming over the radio. And I had the frequency, so I could hear it too on our Prick 24 radio, and I said, "Oh, I can't believe the Army did that." And there they are, all these tanks are leaving and all these soldiers are running away. And I'm thinking, God, stay and fight, man. Jeez. And I told the guys, dig in, and sure enough, here comes all these North Vietnamese, and they're carrying the 50 caliber that they took off the tank and a bunch of other stuff, and they're just marching in the wide open. And so I called an airstrike on them and dropped napalm. And then all you do is see all these arms sticking up like this, from I guess when you burn like that, all your appendages kind of prop up and stuff like that. You can see a whole field of arms and legs sticking up in the air with this napalm on them, and it's kind of like a pouring glue on them. Their arms and stuff are all covered with that stuff.
Yeah, it was like a gasoline.
Yeah.
Incendiary. So smoked a bunch of them, huh?
So that's why I really had it up to here with the Army.
Yeah. So how did you go about leaving Vietnam when you're 13 months up? You fly back home?
Yeah, I flew back home. I was in a firefight, and the radio call was, "We're here to pick up Echo 4 Tango," which is E4 Tahan. And I told them, I said, we're in a firefight. And so we had to wait a couple hours before they could come back in there and get me. And then they finally got me. And I remember I threw all my ammo to everybody. So here's all my ammo and stuff like that. Got in a helicopter and flew to Da Nang. And we were there for almost a week before they put us on the Freedom Bird back to California.
What was that Freedom Forward ride like, Rich?
Well, I remember when it took off, everybody started cheering and everything else and stuff like that. So especially when we took off out of Da Nang, and as soon as we lifted off, everybody started cheering and everything else that they were,
On the way home,
great
back
enough.
home?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, yep.
going back to the world. What was it like when you got back home?
It was really different because there was no parades, no nothing. And a lot of the radical people, they didn't particularly care for the military. And of course, they were always having different little picketing things, against the military for being over there. Whenever I left the base in civilian clothes. I didn't want to go out in my uniform because of that. So, and I thought it was unfair. Here we are fighting for our country, and then they're spitting on us and everything else. So no, it wasn't as good like World War II in Korea. Like those guys, they were heroes, and they were celebrated. We weren't, and that's the difference.
Yeah, stand a bit. So you came back to Camp Pendleton, is that what you're telling me?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We landed at El Toro, Marine Corps Air Station El Toro, and then we bused us to Camp Pendleton, the 14 area, and then there we got our relad orders, released from active duty. You know, next thing you know, we're civilians.
Mm-hmm.
They asked us if we wanted to reenlist, and they said everybody who wants to reenlist get on this side of the room, and everybody that wants to stay in get on this side. Everybody went over to the left. They wanted to get out. I think there's only a couple people, and most of them were like staff NCOs, like staff sergeants, gunnies. We're going to make a career, so they stayed on the one side there. But most of your PFCs on up to probably corporal or sergeant, they decide to get out.
They want to get out, because you were probably going to go back, weren't you, if you re-enlisted?
Yeah. They would have sent me right back. So
you were out of the Marine Corps until what, 1977? Is that when you went back in?
I went back in 1977. I got out in 69. So I was out for just about 8 years before I went back in again.
So what did you do during those 8 years? I mean, you obviously got jobs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I got different jobs. I worked for an insurance company, and then I worked at a repair shop for Penske, but I had no security for my family, and I just had my second child. So I decided to re-enlist into the service and go back in. And I already had a college degree, so I thought about going into OCS or the PLC program.
Mm-hmm.
But I said no. I didn't really want to become an officer, and so I went ahead and went to Naval Air Station Memphis, I think, or
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Let's talk about the station Memphis.
yeah. And then I learned to work on helicopters and crew helicopters and stuff like that. And then when I got my first orders, it was to Kaneohe Marine Corps Air Station, and that's where I met Rick Scott, right there, our guns, as you guys call him. Yeah,
Richard Scott. Yeah, guns. You met him. Okay. So that was your first duty station?
Yeah. Yeah, and it was I got to take my family, had a real nice BAQ, and it was like a 2-story brand new apartment like living, and it was really nice. And that overlooking Lanikai, which is a beach, and you can see the green beautiful ocean and the mountains that were outlining the ocean stuff. It was really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the best beauty station I ever been to. Yeah. In fact, I re-enlisted again. And the funny thing is I wanted to stay there for the next 2 or 3 years, but they sent me to Tustin Marine Corps Air Station with HMH 361. So I ended up there with 361.
And what was that? What was that at again?
That was out of Tustin Marine Corps Air Station, and we did a couple Westpacks out of there on the New Orleans and on the Peleliu. And I did one out of Hawaii when I was stationed there. I was on the New Orleans again. So, yeah, it was quite interesting, those Westpacks.
Yeah, you have 2 or 3 gas packs, huh?
Yeah, a couple of them, yeah.
Are you a shell?
Yeah, but I'm a shellback, yep. I went
Right.
through that. I went through that little charades they do with the sailors do to us. Those big blade boxes that were the rotor blades come in, dude, where they put all the food trash in there.
Uh-huh.
Instead of dumping it off the fantail, they filled that up with all the garbage, and then they made us crawl into it and everything else. And something else, I tell you.
For our listeners that don't know, shellback is somebody who's been across the equator.
The equator, yep.
If you go across the equator, then you become a shellback. And there's a little process, I don't know if they do it anymore, but they used to haze these guys, and it didn't know what your rank was. If you weren't a shellback, you could be
Yeah.
a colonel, and you have to go through the hazing. Everybody, E1's the lowest of the rank,
Yeah.
going up to the commanding officer, has to go through.
Yeah.
Once a right to pass,
Yeah.
quite a big deal to Marines and sailors as well.
Yeah. Our sergeant major and our CO got put into it too, so that they went through it.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. No more being a wog. Not a wog. Oh, you're kidding me? You never went across the equator?
No. Everything I did was, I went to Spain for a year with a bomb, but I was 6 degrees north of the equator, but I never went across it. So after you were in Hawaii, you were your list. And did you go somewhere else besides that?
Well, I got out in 1984 is when I got out.
Okay.
And then, I worked with the, what do you call it? The civil service. I got a civil service job in aviation at Edwards Air Force Base, California.
Okay.
And then they seen that I was a crew chief on helicopters, so they put me on the Chinook there to run tests, icing tests for aircraft that they were always thinking about if they were going to attack Russia, it'd be through the Aleutian Islands. So we had to do some winter spraying on these helicopters. And the Chinook that I was in had these 10-foot long sprays on each side with nozzles on them, and the aircraft would fly behind it and they'd spray them. And we did that in Duluth, Minnesota when it's real cold.
And de-ice?
Well, they were trying to see where to put de-icing on either the blades or rotor head or whatever. When some of these aircraft would get back and they go in the hangar, the crew chiefs would be up there with a hammer and a chisel chipping off these blocks of ice. I mean, blocks of ice that were on the rotor head. It built up that much.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And so it helped the engineers decide how they were going to put the anti-icing on there for these aircraft. And they had to put these rubber mats on the rotor, on the Apaches, because they have the kind of like a aileron in the very back where the rudder is, and or actually the blade. Mm-hmm. And some of the ice coming off of that rotor hitting those panels back there was causing big dents in it. So the engineers designed it where they put the rubber pads back there, so it just kind of bounces off, and they don't lose their aerodynamics.
Okay. So how long did you do the civil service with the?
I did it for about 2 years, and then Lockheed Corporation was looking for people with aviation backgrounds, and so I went down there and applied for it, and they picked me to work for them. And then they sent me to Saudi Arabia for a couple of years, and I was the program director for the Lockheed Arabia aviation department.
So you lived in Saudi Arabia for a couple of years.
Yeah, I was in Saudi Arabia for a couple of years.
How was that?
That was interesting.
Yeah.
Of course, I have a kind of an Arabic last name, so they always say, "You know what that stands for?" I go, "What?" It goes, "It means a rice mixer, or where they mix grain and stuff like that. They're called a Tahan." And I go, "Anyway, or a mill, one that mills. Yeah, that's what it is." So I go, "Oh, I'm a miller."
Okay.
And so I did that. I was there when the USS Stark got hit by an Exorcist missile from Iran, and we jumped in the helicopter. We tried to get, whenever you fly a helicopter, it has to be one American pilot and one Arabic pilot, and then one crew chief that's Arabic and one American. Well, it was early in the morning. I mean, like 1 or 2. and I happened to be on duty there, and so we all jumped in the helicopter, and we made phone calls, but we couldn't get any of the Arabs in there, so we decided to do it on our own, and then we plucked a couple sailors out of the water that were in the water, and you could see the Stark listing to one side. And eventually that ship made it to Bahrain, and then they did the repairs there, and then found a couple sailors wrapped in the metal that were missing, and they found two bodies, I believe, that were in there.
Right.
So, but we got in trouble, believe it or not. The Arabs got pissed off, and we told them, hey, we made phone calls and couldn't get anybody to go, and it was an emergency, so we had to go out there and help the Stark, USS Stark.
Wow, that's pretty handy stuff. Okay, so after Saudi Arabia, what'd you do after that?
After Saudi Arabia, I applied after my contract was up. It's a 2-year contract. I applied at McDonnell Douglas, and I got hired on there as an instructor, and I worked in the training department for about 6 years, and then they moved me to the flight line to be in charge of the flight line, and I did that, and I did that until Boeing bought out McDonnell Douglas, and then they laid everybody off. And but Boeing would call me back every once in a while because there was a couple of equipments that I had bought for McDonnell Douglas by going out to these different areas and getting like high reach equipment. This one apparatus that they could work on the rudder and up real high up there and stuff that's got a little elevator. Boeing didn't know how to use any of that stuff, so they knew I was the trainer on that, so they called me back to work, and then I worked with them for a couple more weeks, and then they'd lay me back off and bring me back in there, because they had the P-dot tube machine that was a brand new thing, and they didn't know how to operate it. So I had to go back and show them how to work that thing, and then they laid me off again. You'd think they'd want to keep me around, but no, they just kept laying me off and bring me back, laying me off. So I'd get unemployment, stop my unemployment, get my unemployment back, and so it was going back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So it got to be a little hectic. So that's what I did. What do I do after that? Oh, I started selling cars. I went in the car business. Yeah. I did real well in that. I was really fair with people. I wouldn't trying to rip them off or anything else like that, Oh, yes. Okay. Probably the most interesting, it's unbelievable what happened on that. The guy that took that picture of me, his name is Dave Brush. I think I sent you a picture of him. And you can see his camera hanging from.
We're going to put it up here on the video so people can see who he was.
Okay, and
sure, he took that picture in LA, obviously. Did you know that he was taking the picture?
No, I didn't. He crawled over to me when I was firing the machine gun, and he wanted to know who I was. And I told him I was PFC Tahan. Of course, your first name's always your ranks.
Yeah.
I was PFC at that time. Yeah. He said, okay, and then that was the last I seen him. I didn't see him again until, that was in 68, 9, so it was 4 years later at the gym. I was working out. I was already out of the Marine Corps, and I hadn't gone back in yet, so, and he was right behind me working out on the machine behind me, and then he kept looking in the mirror at me, and then I noticed he kept looking at me, and then he finally walked over and says, were you in the Marine Corps? And then I looked at him, I go, yeah, you're that photographer, right? And that took the picture of me. And, I didn't know about me, but I said, you're that photographer in a way. And he goes, yeah, I took the picture of you firing that machine gun. And he says, I think I have it somewhere in my files, but I'll have to look for it. So we exchanged phone numbers, and then to this day, he passed away 2 years ago. We were friends for like ever. And he always thought about the Marines all the time. He'd always keep me around, and he'd go, hey, Marine, come over here. Even though we weren't, in the service anymore. He was such a great guy. And he finally found the picture, I think in 2007, I think, or 2010, somewhere right in there. And that was that one photo I sent you, the real slide, the real picture with the tank in the background and stuff. And and he sent that to me, and I gave it to my sister Lorraine, who's in Omaha, Nebraska, and she's got it on the wall to this day. Then in 2000, I think 14 or 17, something like that, the book came out, and there it was. And I was like, when everybody was calling me, said, "Hey, your picture's on a book," because I had that on my cell phone as my profile picture, that you have.
Yeah.
When somebody calls you, it'll pop up. And then I took it off for a couple of years, and then when the book came out, people remembered that, and they started calling me and telling me, "Hey, it's on there." And my wife, Debbie, who passed away, she was an Air Force major. She called Rick Bowden, the writer of the book, and she told him, "That's my husband." And he goes, "Oh, we've been looking for that guy for a long time. We don't know who he is." And so he says, "I'd like to invite him to San Diego because that's where I'm going to be doing a book signing thing and an interview." So he sent me a ticket, and I flew out there, got to meet him, and he hugged me and everything else. And I said, "How did you find that picture?" And he told me, he says he sent like several guys to Washington, D.C. because apparently all the combat photographers, all of them, have to send their pictures to D.C. To the archives. Well, he sent some of his people there, and they found 5 pictures, and they brought it to him, and he picked out that one out of the 5 and put it on his book cover. And that's how that got on the book. And then I've been signing books, God, since then. I at your place there in Indiana, there at the clubhouse, I auctioned out a couple books that I brought with me to help you guys out with the money and stuff like that. They bought them. And I've never received to this day. And I mean, I just signed a book 2 weeks ago, and a month before that, I went to my high school, and the principal of the school wanted me to sign the book. So I signed it for her, and she's got it in the administration office on a little pedestal type thing. And and I've never received a penny. I mean, that book sold for $540 at one place, and a couple $100 here and there, and it's all donated to the program.
Sure. Veterans organizations, all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah. So.
Well, that's super cool. So the photographer guy, did he know that Mark Bowden was trying to get in touch with you, or did he have any idea that this image was going to be used on the cover of his book?
Yeah. He found out about that, and didn't want any royalties or anything. And then an artist drew that picture. It's in the Corona Vet Center. Big picture of that scene. The artist called up Dave and said, "Does he get permission to do that?" And Dave said, "Yeah, no problem. Just go ahead." He was able to do that without any repercussions. So. Dave was a great guy too. I mean, he was a great guy when he passed away. He died from Agent Orange. It just ate him up, and he got so thin. And he was one of those. He's like 6'2", and he did some modeling when he got out of the military because he had a great physique. And always used to get on me because I was putting on a little weight and stuff like that. And he'd say, "Hey, watch what you're eating," and blah blah blah. And then what happens? He's the one that goes first. Yeah.
Well, that's an awesome story there. That's an awesome story. And is there anybody that you want to give a shout out to or anything like that while we're on here?
Well, I'd like to give a shout out to Guns, Rick Scott, because he set up a couple of book signings there at the South Bend. Barnes and Noble there, and he did I couldn't believe the display he put out there. It was a fantastic display. It had the background on this, it was a big, and then he had everything on there. Meet Richard Tahan for signing, and then had a picture of the book on that was put on there and everything. And then a stack of books, and I got to sign them all for people who came in there, and they got to meet me, meet and greet, and all that stuff. So he took the time to do that, and I thought that was really commendable of him to do that. We've been friends ever since.
That's awesome.
Because I really didn't know Rick that much when we were at Kaneohe, because I was in the air crew, and he had flight wings to fly, but I think he was an avionics guy or something like that. I can't remember, but he would go on test flights because he had air crew wings, so he got to fly with us and stuff like that. So, great guy. And then I just stayed in touch. I can't even remember how we met again. I think it was Ken Tucci, one of the guys that knew Rick, and on Facebook it had Rick Scott. And I said, "God, that name sounds familiar." And then I text Rick, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I remember you." Blah blah blah. And then we became friends, and then we were stationed together, and he remembered that. So yeah.
Well, that's
And
super
then one
cool.
thing, yeah. And then he invited me over, and then when the book came out, then he says, "Hey, Rich, you got to get over here and sign some books." And I remember I was driving up to Indiana, and I was speeding a little bit, and the police officer pulled me over, and I said, "Oh, I'm trying to get up to Indiana because I got to do book signing and stuff." So I was in a little bit of a hurry. He goes, "Oh, you're a Marine." I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "I'm a Marine too." And so he says, what are you signing?" I grabbed the book. I said, "This one here." And he goes, "Oh, can I have one?" And I go, "Yeah." So I signed it. He let me go. I didn't get a ticket. Yeah.
That's a great story there.
Yeah. Yeah. That was cool, I thought.
Well, listen, Rich, it's been a pleasure having you on here, and I'm glad you shared your story with us.
Okay.
This will help out. So anybody, yeah, get yourself a copy of this book. It's a good read. I read it, and it'll give you a history of the Vietnam War and what was going on at that time in 1968. Rich, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'll be talking to you soon, okay? I'll be giving you a holler.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll try to get up there this summer when you guys have your big.
Bailout party.
Yeah. When is it? Did you get a date on that yet?
It's October 3rd is the blowout party. It's in the fall.
It's in the fall. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but we have a poker event in June. We have a poker event on June 13th if you want to come for that.
All right.
Well,
I usually, I'm in Omaha. I'll probably be in Omaha after, let's see, September. Yeah. And, because I'll be in Europe for a couple of weeks. And then, so when I get back, then I could get out there. Cause it's only like, I think about a 10-hour drive from where I'm in Omaha. Yeah, in Omaha. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's good. You're going to New York for a couple of weeks?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll be in, I'll be on land and then on a ship after that. I think it's all in the same tour. My sister, she kind of set it up and stuff like that. She did the Europe thing 6 months ago, so she's going back for seconds, and she wanted me to go with her.
That's very cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, listen, okay, thanks folks for watching. This is another episode of Reading Writers Machine podcast. We'll talk to you soon, okay? Send a thought.
Okay, Doc. Thank you. Bye-bye.